This is Asha Dore with Totally Biased Reviews. Today, I'm talking with Mark Jason Williams about his travel book, Out in the World.
Hi, I'm Mark Jason Williams. I'm the co-author of Out in the World, which is the first LGBTQI plus travel guide published by National Geographic. It came out in May of 2024, and I'm super excited because it's the first of its kind. And I couldn't believe that in 2022, when we first started pitching the book to publishers, that nothing like this had existed. And it almost didn't exist because I first started writing a essay collection. That's what I was really trying to sell. And it just wasn't getting the traction that I would have liked. A lot of the feedback was, the writing is good and you have a unique voice. And there were a lot of comparisons to David Sedaris, which is an ultimate compliment,
Awesome.
but we just don't see it how it's going to. We have doubts about how it's going to perform in a crowded space because you're not a household name, or maybe they didn't quite see the vision of the book the way, when you're writing it, you're very attached and you're very um close to it, so sometimes you miss that the bigger picture, and sometimes maybe there isn't the hook that. And it's all subjective, right? Like an editor will see one thing and another editor will see another thing. So I was a little bit disappointed that it just wasn't uh gonna be that my words weren't gonna be turned into a book. We're as writers, we're all hungry. We all want that very first book. It's such a milestone and an amazing accomplishment. So my friend Amy and I met through Susan Shapiro's writing class, and we became close. And when I was sort of um, complaining, for lack of a better word, about not being able to sell my essay collection, she said, "Well, you also write travel articles. So have you ever considered writing a travel book?" And I said, "No, not really." And then I started looking for um, vacation ideas for my husband and I, and browsing the internet or other travel guides. Everything was basically like, here's this hot spot. If there was an LGBTQIA plus section in a guide, it was usually in the back of a book and it focused on the bar or the club. And I'm like, I'm 45. I want to know where my husband and I can go to a cute small town and go antiquing
Mhm.
and have it be queer friendly and feel really safe, right?
Mhm.
So um, I was like, Amy, like nothing, like I can't find anything that tells me how to do that. Nothing like it exists out there.
Mhm.
And she said to me, well, then maybe that's our book.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then, so the first idea that we had, oh, I should backtrack and say that Amy had been, had published a bunch of books, including a really great memoir. So she was a published author,
Mhm.
and she was helping me um, with the proposal for the essay collection. So she and I had a relationship. She didn't just like walk up to me and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
we should do this book." So she was then. So I I said to her, I'd like to do the travel book, and she said, "I think that's great, but I have a condition." And I said, "What?" And she said, "I want to work on it with you. I Let's be co-authors," because she had the publishing track record.
Mhm.
And at the time, I was writing more articles and she was writing fewer articles. So it was like, okay, you have someone who has the books and someone who has the articles. We thought that would make for a good team.
Mhm.
So we came up with the idea of a travel book, and At first, we thought it was going to be for LGBTQI plus couples because we often travel with our spouses, and we thought that would be a great idea. And then we realized how limiting that was.
Mhm.
Um, and I remembered all of the times when I travel the world by myself or with family or with friends. And that's not meaning to sound disrespectful to my husband, but I've enjoyed all of these different
Mhm.
travels with different people. And so we thought, let's not limit it. Let's do our best to include everyone. And
Yeah.
then we thought, you know, our straight friends always say like they want to go to the same places we do.
Yeah.
So why do um, the LGBTQI plus community should have a book that represents them?
Mhm.
But because nothing like that was out there. But why do we need a separate book for the queer community and people who identify as straight? Why can't we all enjoy the same places together?
Mhm.
So that became the concept behind Out in the World. Let's write about over 120 destinations around the world where we can all enjoy a welcoming spirit and travel the world together.
As I was, like, looking through it, I was like, "This is such a smart idea," and also, why would you want to go anywhere that wasn't welcoming to, you know, queer people?
So when we met with National Geographic, when we were trying to sell the book to them and we had a Zoom, I mean, I was the most nervous I've ever been. I'm this nobody, and National Geographic is interested in this book I want to co-write. Like that was, whoa, like knocked me off my chair, humbling. Um, and they said, well, straight people have their own books. Why include them? And I remember I said, I know what it's like to be excluded. And that's not a great feeling.
Mhm.
And if you're a queer owned business, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to. I mean, there were certain cases where a certain hotel or a guest house may cater to only men or only women or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, if you're a queer owned business, you're going to want the support of an entire community. You're going to make everybody feel welcome. You're not going to turn away anybody because of what they identify as. So it was important to me to not only include travelers of gay and straight and queer and bi and trans and LGBTQI plus across the board, but also it was a way to kind of support the businesses that are queer owned from all of us traveling there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really smart. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's really nice, the way that y'all organized it. I want you to speak to how so many things about it, but how you organized it. But I really like that, in each city there are a couple of businesses. There's um, some considerations about where in the city to stay and what it's close to and what's walkable, and it's just really nice because you get like a picture, but having those businesses there too that are friendly I think is so
Mhm.
important, especially because there are so many places that you know where you might find some unfriendly businesses. Like there are many places in
Right.
the South, many places in, fairly rural-ish areas of the country, middle of the country too. And I think it's really great to have those because it's like, wow, I like knowing that they exist. I grew up in a town like that, and it's hard to keep a business in a place that's kind of hostile. So it's awesome.
It was important for us to support queer-owned businesses, but it was equally important to support any business that's welcoming. Like, you don't have to be an LGBTQI plus owned business to welcome the community, right? Like anybody can. It's actually super easy, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and we did take, to your point, we did take considerations um, into every destination we wrote about. We thought about different kinds of travelers, not just us, and different options. Maybe somebody's a walker and, wants to explore 3 miles on foot. Maybe somebody has some mobility issues and wants to just have a hotel close to everything and um, be able to do things at their comfort level. You know, Different budgets we were very conscious of because not everyone is going to stay at the Ritz. I don't stay at the Ritz,
Mhm, mhm,
so inns, fancy hotels, campsites, like we try to get things across the board to make travel more accessible. And we wanted to have each chapter be a theme
mhm,
because we realized like you're not going to wake up and say, I want to go to the Northeast today, right? You're going to wake up and say, I want a beautiful beach,
mhm,
or I want to go to a place that is known for great wine, or a place where, you might have a lot of like alleged hauntings.
mhm, mhm,
You might want to go to a foodie town. So we wanted to tap into the way people are actually expanding how they travel these days and thinking about the experience rather than the destination. And
mhm,
the other thing that the themes did for us is if you, let's talk about, a beautiful beach. Um, Maybe you don't have the time or resources to go to the Caribbean, but there is a place closer within the US that we can also recommend. So it sort of became a matter of, okay, well, if I can't make it to Curacao today, I can try this other great place that's a little closer to where
mhm.
I live. And we did our best to include places around the globe because whoever picks up this book, like we don't know where they live, so we wanted to we wanted to make sure that there were destinations on, both sides of the US, in the middle of the US, north, south, all across Europe, North America, South America, all of the continents, even Antarctica is in the book.
Antarctica's in the book. This is one of the I was gonna bring up. It's so funny. I teach ESL at night.
Okay.
Last night, I made a joke in class. I was teaching them how to talk about vacations, and I said, maybe you want to go to Antarctica, and nobody knew what I was talking about. So I showed them Antarctica, and I was joking about how there's nothing to do. Nobody goes to Antarctica.
hmm
I like saw that part of the book earlier today, and I was like, oh my God, I guess
Well,
people go. Sorry.
yeah, a lot more and more people are going these days. I mean, it's probably one of the most incredible places I've ever been to. Basically, I was a kid who had leukemia from the time I was 4. And I got really upset because all of my friends were going to Disney World, and I was spending my summers in the hospital. And so it made me very sad and kind of mopey. And my mom, who's this very like Italian American force of nature, one day, and she's like, perk up. And she would bring in like National Geographic magazines to keep inspiring like my dream of travel. And one day she brought in a globe and she was like, spin it and we're gonna go anywhere it lands on. And I was like, I don't want to play this stupid game. And my mom, being her, she's like, Mark Jason. And I was like, okay, I knew it at that moment. I better do what she says. And it landed on Antarctica. I knew nothing about Antarctica. She didn't even have a passport. And so she just got library books and we started reading about Antarctica. And I was like, oh, there's penguins and there's icebergs. People died trying to go there. Like, cool. I'm 4. Like, oh, great. And then I had this dream of going to Antarctica, but it wasn't accessible. It wasn't affordable. So that dream kind of like fell by the wayside. And then 30 years later, I was surfing profiles in OkCupid, and I came across a guy who had pictures of Antarctica in his profile. So I sent him a message, and it was like such a dorky message. And I was like, wow, tell me about it. It was not Jane Austen territory. It was like so bad. And we ended up talking for a while and going on a date. And the whole first date, I just grilled him on his experiences there. Um, and he said that he would go back with me. And I'm like, this guy's totally flirting. This is just like first date shenanigans. Like it's never gonna happen. We got married. And then for our honeymoon, he was like, where do you want to go? Like, should we do the classic thing, like a beach? And I was like, can we go to Antarctica? And it was so expensive that no, we could not go to Antarctica, but we kept following various companies' social medias. And at the very last minute, we found this like flash deal where it was basically 50% off. So we like basically put our savings into it. We got on a ship. It was like the roughest seas on earth. I was wearing a patch that made me hallucinate. Like I turned to him and I was like, "Is this what acid feels like?" And he was like, "I'm in public health. Like, how would I know? I know I don't do acid." Um, and I was like, um, but like the being seeing the penguins and the icebergs and being so close to a whale, so close and so quiet that I can hear the whale breathe. It was incredible. But the other thing was I was not in control. I'm a vacation planner, and Antarctica is like the least hospitable place on Earth, and you're at the mercy of the weather and other conditions. And it sort of hit me because I'm here at what felt like the end of the world, and other factors are controlling everything I do. And the last time that happened to me, I was a kid in the hospital. And I had all these feelings just sort of hit me. And I realized that maybe I was carrying a little bit of baggage, a little bit of PTSD from the time I was a kid still. Um, and it was really a place to process that and to deal with it and really understand that beyond the go here and do this aspect of travel, it can really be like a healing moment for a lot of people as well. So it was a good lesson and never underestimate the power of travel.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I love so many things about that, but one thing that comes to mind, so I have 3 kids. My daughter is has disabilities, and we've spent a bunch of summers in hospitals doing surgeries and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I I just think about how wonderful it is to have a life like that when you're a kid, and then to grow up and I imagine travel a bunch of places and then write about them. Like what a wonderful, hopeful future that is. That's really cool. And it's one of the hardest things. We never talk about it, what it's like to have, to be a kid or have a kid that's in the hospital all the time. And this is a
Mhm.
really cool thing. I have a feeling I'm going to tell her about this because I think she's going to love it. I've done the put the finger on the map thing a couple times with her, and we've we've done almost everything. She asked to go to the Dominican Republic and swim with dolphins, and that's been a little bit harder to
Right.
manifest.
Right.
We'll get there. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think that the world is getting more accessible in terms of um travelers with disabilities, but we do have a ways to go. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're taking her places and keeping that travel inspiration alive. Like that, I know that it probably can't be easy, but and that's just great that you're doing that. It warms my heart.
I think it's really wonderful, and I do think that travel is really important. Like I realized as I was, looking through your book, and I've like read different parts ever since I got it. I was like, I'm not going to read this cover to cover because I wouldn't naturally, but I want to read all of it. So I've kind of, just bookmarked all the things that I have read. And I was just thinking, a lot of times, or at least in my generation growing up, travel was like this very upper class experience. My family lived in Florida. We would go to Branson for vacation, which is so funny to me, hilarious. And then, but I think that I rarely traveled when I was a kid, and then I started like just getting bus tickets when I was a teenager and going random places because I wanted to see more. And now since COVID, I think that travel has become something that people like insist upon and do no matter what your financial experience is. Like we just find a
Hmm.
way. It's like it just burned us all into traveling. Like we must do it. And I like that your book makes it accessible, and I like that it's different. Like a travel book is not just something that you would find at the doctor's office now. It's actually something that you can use in a practical way in your life, you know?
Yeah, thank you. We really wanted it to be playful and
Mhm,
user friendly. Like, don't read it cover to cover, skip around,
mhm,
find what inspires you, find what excites you, find a place far away or find a place close to home. Somebody said to me the other day, actually, you know, I don't have a lot of money and I just want to be in my sweatpants, so I don't think that travel's for me. And I don't know how to process that.
mhm,
And I said, if you can get in your car and drive 2 hours, that's travel. Like
mhm.
travel, you can live in a place like New York City and go stay, you can live in Manhattan and go spend the weekend in Queens, and it's a totally different world.
Yeah.
So, we don't have to think about these grand, expensive vacations. We can do something that just takes us out of our environment, out of our routine, and that's travel. It's
Mhm,
it's very much an emotional state for me as it is a physical distance.
mhm,
And I also think that one of the great things about travel is that you're not you don't have to be whatever your everyday life is, I should say. Like, if you're um, a busy attorney, just throwing it out there, and you go on vacation, you can stop being an attorney for 3 days. I mean, some people don't want to turn it off and they feel more comfortable working while on vacation, but whatever your day-to-day life is, whenever you're traveling, um, it's a chance to just take a breath.
mhm.
If you're caring for your daughter, and if you go someplace without your daughter, you have a couple of days where you're not your daughter's caretaker. You're you, and
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want, and
Mhm.
that's magical.
Yeah. I have a thing where I'm very clean in real life, but when I travel, I'm like, everything is everywhere. It's like a disaster. And I've been trying to be more mature about it, but there's just something about breaking, even that little break, even if I live in Seattle, I'm in West Seattle, I'm by the water. So if I go up to, downtown or something and stay there, I'd still do that because it's just like breaking the routine. I'm not folding things. Like I
Mhm,
fold nothing. I just shove things into bags, and it's amazing. It's like being a teenager again. I feel like my parents' generation with Disney World and my generation too. It's like we have this idea that there's this magical place where you can go and you can just be free. And
mhm,
Disney World is like this excellent, super capitalist, but excellent. They just I had went there recently for the first time in a bunch of years. I took my kids, and that was one of the places that my daughter asked to go. And I was just like, wow, these people are profoundly good at this. It's just a complete break
mhm,
from reality. And but you don't need it. You don't need it. Like you're saying, you can just look at things a little bit differently. And
mhm.
I love that. I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
So did you go to all the cities that you wrote about?
Between the two of us, we covered the majority of them, and if we hadn't been in a bit, we contacted people that we knew who lived there that we trusted to sort of see what had changed or what was going on. Like, we didn't just want to have a Google book, right? Like, you can
Mhm.
go on the internet for that. And we really wanted to have a personal touch. Somebody recently pointed out that we, in almost in every destination, we pointed out a bookstore or an indie bookstore, at least within the US. And I was like, yes, because we went out of our way to find them, because that's the kind of travelers we are. That was something that was important to us. And we know that people love bookstores.
Mhm.
So why not? So, yes, one of the main selling points for National Geographic, I believe, is that we had been to a lot of places when we sent the proposal to the book, we had already been to the many, many places that actually made it into the book,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
many that didn't.
Yeah, and that's another question. Are there a couple places that you, like, really wish you had been able to keep in, or you just really love to go there yourself that didn't make it into the final cut?
Yeah, there are, we had 120 or so destinations to write about in the book. I think our initial list was over 200
Wow.
because what we because there's so many places we love, right?
Mhm.
But we realized, like, we tried to balance like 50% US and 50% international.
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't always easy because many parts of the US are inclusive and welcoming, but we couldn't include them all because we wanted to balance with other places around the world. Um, we also realized that, like, everybody knows, like, New York is like super LGBTQI plus friendly. So we didn't want to spend a lot of time in New York. Like, it's in the back in the there's a chapter called Classic Cities for everyone, which are like just our favorite spots and like quick hits. But
Mhm.
like, not a lot of people know Eureka Springs, Arkansas is very LGBTQI plus friendly. So we wanted to focus a lot on surprising places. There's a chapter called Rainbows that get left off the list, which is one of my favorites
Mhm.
because we really got to talk about places where you might not expect to be welcomed as a queer traveler. One of those places that didn't make it into the book was Sri Lanka.
Hmm.
On paper, homosexuality is illegal, and they were making progress, but it kind of stalled. And me and my husband went there, and we had a great time. We had a tour guide. It was a private tour. It was very affordable by Western standards, so we could afford to have like a private guide who would drive us around the country. And, like, if you like seeing elephants, it was one of the I think we went to a national park and we saw about 40 elephants, and that was really great. And the people were welcoming. And one night I kept like asking our tour guide Duminda if he would go out to dinner with us, and he kept saying no. So the last night I was like, it's the last night here. You have to come to dinner with us, please, please, please. So we went out to dinner, like a local place, and I learned that they do drag shows there. Like, I just started talking to the owner who was performing on a keyboard, singing that night, oddly. Um, and he was like, "Thank you so much for coming and supporting me." And I'm like, I'm just here for dinner," but we just got to talking. And he's like, "You should come back for a drag show." And we do Pride in Colombo. And I was like, that's far more progressive acting than I would have given the country for.
Mhm.
Um, but when so I wanted to include it in the chapter of Walk on the Wild Side, which is about wildlife encounters because of the elephants and whales and other great things that you can see there. But um, it was just a little too controversial at the time. So we just wanted to play it safe. Now, on that note, we do recommend places that historically have not been the most LGBTQI plus friendly, or on paper, the laws are not the greatest. But we felt it wasn't our job to exclude or boycott. We wanted to write about places where we felt comfortable and let the reader have make their own choices.
Mhm.
And it's not always cut and dry. Like the Maldives, for example, um, on paper, homosexuality is illegal, but then you go to your resort and you're in the safety of your resort bubble. Like if you're at a Marriott, Marriott's policies are very LGBTQI plus friendly, and they could potentially be employing someone who identifies as queer who would be possibly further persecuted in a different country where they might be from. So I would say there are definitely areas in the world to use some caution, but we really wanted to move beyond just the traditional hotspots, and we would never judge a place by its laws. Maybe we would if we hadn't been there, right? Like that's another great thing about travel. It's about exposure.
Yeah.
So if I go to a place like Morocco, again, homosexuality is illegal, but Marrakesh, the people there were among the most welcoming people I've ever met, and they did not care that we were a gay couple.
That's amazing.
I think everyone should go where they feel comfortable, and everyone should determine what their limits are. Like some people I know don't want to go to a place where they can't openly hold hands in the street.
Mhm.
We're not PDA people, so we don't care about that. But if that's a deal breaker for you, you have nine other suggestions in any given chapter where you could be holding hands.
Mhm.
Um, and I also think it's important to like ask yourself what the fine line is between being open about who we are and also observing the customs
Mhm.
in any given place, because I have some people who went to Japan and then told me that it was not LGBTQI plus friendly because they got um, scolded for holding hands in public and showing public displays of affection. And I'm like, but culturally, Japan frowns upon PDAs for anybody.
Yeah, it's pretty inclusive in there, frowning upon
So,
PDA.
right.
Yeah.
So I don't think they were signaling you out. I think that you were just maybe not aware
Mhm.
of it's customary not to do that in Japan. So you were a little disrespectful of their culture,
Mhm.
if you think about it.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to go to a place, there's other places to go. Like if holding hands or sharing a kiss, on the street is like really important to you, know what the customs are and then don't go there.
Yeah.
Just pick a different place.
Yeah, valid. And I think that the way that you've organized it by theme really helps with that. And it's just, by the way, surprising. Like there were in the food chapter and the wine chapter too. I was like, I had no idea some of these places were, you know, food places. Like I wrote one of the food places down. I think it was like very surprising to me. I was like, what? You can get good food there?
Was it Boise,
It was
Idaho? Because
Boise. It
that
was Boise.
surprised
That's what it
me.
was.
I know. So, funny thing about the food chapter is so for most of the chapters, Amy and I tackled different destinations within each chapter. So I'd say, I'm going to go to France. And she'd say, okay, I'll do California.
Mhm.
But there were a few where we each wrote the entire chapter because neither one of us like, she wanted nothing to do with the haunted chapter. She's like, that's all yours. You go and enjoy that. And then I remember one of the notes she gave me, because we would edit each other's stuff, because we did our best to give the book like a uniform voice. And
Mhm.
as co-authors, that was a little bit challenging in itself, but she was like, no, you're being too gruesome, or you're going into way too much detail. I was having so much fun with that haunted stuff because I know people get really into it. Um, but I was like, Amy, if we're gonna write about food, I think it should be you, because I have a very fussy palate, and I like things as plain as possible. So I am not gonna write about somebody's like gourmet or extravagant menu, because I it gets a little bit lost on me. But Amy is a total foodie, so she loved writing about that.
Um, is there anything, or well, first of all, are there any places that are in your book that you haven't been that are like on your next, like you want to go there next?
So I personally have not been to Mexico City. Amy has, and I don't know a soul who's gone to Mexico City and hasn't fallen in love with it. So I'm a little jealous that I haven't been there yet. So that's a destination that I really have my eye on. Amy's been to Thailand. I have not. So I would love to go to
Mhm.
Thailand.
Nice.
So those are two of the biggest that stand out right now.
Yeah, I haven't been to Thailand yet. We had a trip there planned in March of 2020, so that didn't work.
Yeah, well, I just did I had a trip planned for June of 2020, and we just did it last year.
Oh, wow, good.
And that was to go to Bali and Bali, mainland Malaysia, and Borneo.
Oof, yeah, nice.
And Borneo is another place that had I been there with enough time to like, if I had been there 3 or 4 years ago, it probably would have made it into the book, because it was very welcoming, and I felt really great there, and it was just a really great place to be.
That's awesome. That's really good to know. I think you're gonna love Mexico City when you go. I mean,
Mhm.
I loved that the Pueblos Mágicos were listed. Like they're oh my
Mhm.
God, they're just incredible. I haven't been, obviously, I've only been to like a few of them, but it's just the best. It's the best. We always go and we stay in Coyoacan, like the Frida
Mhm.
Kahlo neighborhood, and
Mhm.
there's always like, people selling mango, and they're like the best mango in the world. I mean, you just can walk around and be happy.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I'm I'm looking forward to visiting, and I mean, there's so many different parts of Mexico, right? But I recently went to Loreto, Mexico for the first time, in Baja California Sur, and um, it was a Pueblos Magicos, and the town was just so warm and inviting, and the people were so friendly. The food was delicious, but it's also one of the most amazing places to see blue whales, which I had
Oh,
never seen, and that I went in February, so January, February, March, early March, I believe, is like the time to go there if you want to see blue whales. But in the summertime, you could also go like snorkeling and scuba diving, and that's a whole marine national park. It was like I connected in Phoenix, and I think it was like a 2-hour flight from Phoenix, and felt like a whole different world.
that's awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah.
We've been like looking for our next, like, where do we want to go in Mexico? We want to go to Oaxaca, of course, but we haven't been
Mhm.
there yet. But Mexico is just a lovely, lovely place.
The nice thing, yeah, it is. And the nice thing about Loretto is like if you're there with your kids, they're not going to wander very far because it's so small, right? So you can kind of relax there. That's sometimes, I mean, I love big cities, but like I also really love small towns for reasons like that. Like I feel like you can just enjoy and relax a little bit more when you're there. I'm just really proud to have co-authored Out in the World. It really, like, before it, I personally didn't feel seen in a travel book.
Mhm.
And I'm really grateful that National Geographic published it. And I'm really like overcome with the joy that it's bringing to other people. Like, at a recent book event, I met a mom of a teenager who identifies as part of the LGBTQI plus community. And the mom said that, now I have a tool to plan family vacations and we can sit around our kitchen table and figure out where to go that's going to be welcoming and safe for all of us.
Mhm.
And I almost started crying because that's so special. And I wish I had something like that when I was a teenager or even in my 20s or 30s. And at 40, I was still wishing for it, which is part of the reason um, I wanted to write this book. And also, I think it's, for anyone who's working on a book right now, it's so important to know the market and see where the void is and try to fill it because that's how you're going to get published. And the other thing I'd like to say about travel in general is that we have a lot of progress left to make, obviously, but it is heartening that the world is becoming more inclusive. 10 or 20 years ago, I may not have wanted to go to Kentucky or Arkansas. Now I can go to essentially in all of our conservative minded states, you are bound to find a welcoming pocket. I just went to South Dakota, which I thought was like way off limits for a queer traveler. But Rapid City was a delightful surprise because there was um, a very visible, you're not going to find pride flags everywhere, but there was a very visible queer community who were very enthusiastic about change. And give it another couple years, and maybe you will see a pride flag. They do have they do celebrate Pride. There are a lot of businesses that are very LGBTQI plus welcoming. Where in the hotel I stayed, the Hotel Alex Johnson, workers identified as queer or trans, and it was nice to see in freaking South Dakota, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I love surprises like that, and I think we're going to find more and more of them, which is great. So the other message I'd like to send with this book is please don't feel limited.